What is up, besties? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Scotty Holiday. I'm a queer creator and a huge Star Wars nerd, so if you're into either one of those things, please consider subscribing for more. Today we got chapter 23 of The Mandalorian Season 3, The Spies, and this episode really gave me everything I've been missing and wanting from the series. Season 3 has had its peaks and valleys, but this episode was really a standout and a great lead up to the season finale next Wednesday. Now, before I get into my thoughts, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of Chapter 23. I'm putting out weekly reviews for each new episode of The Mandalorian Season 3, and you can check those out along with all my Mando content at the link in the cards and the description as well. Now let's get into this review. The episode opens up in the Coruscant underworld as we follow Elia Kane through the dark streets and alleyways, backdropped with neon lights and a pounding soundtrack. The music felt very similar to the song Niamos from the Andor series, but harder and more edgy, which I think fit these opening scenes perfectly. Between Jedi Fallen Order, Andor, and The Mandalorian, I love hearing the familiar sounds they're using to build an idea of what the in-universe music sounds like to the audience. Elia Kane makes contact with Moff Gideon via probe droid, confirming he was behind the pirate attack on Navarro and informing him of the Mandalorian's aid to Greef Karga through Bo-Katan, Din Djarin, and the Children of the Watch, with Gideon remarking, "This cannot be. Those two factions are sworn enemies." After the call ends, Moff Gideon walks through a chamber of ray-shielded armor, then through another room containing what I can only assume are cloning tanks, as he finally makes his way into a final chamber for a meeting with the Shadow Council, a secret council made up of Imperial loyalists governing the Empire behind the scenes, including Captain Pellaeon, who spoke of the return and reemergence of Grand Admiral Thrawn and Project Necromancer under Commandant Brendol Hux, which I can only assume has to do with the return of Emperor Palpatine, especially after Gideon and Hux's comments of new leadership and cloning research. Commandant Brendol Hux is also the father of the sequel trilogy's General Armitage Hux. Moff Gideon's previous request for additional TIE interceptors, bombers, and 3 Praetorian guards is brought into question as he expresses his concern for the Mandalorians' retaking of Mandalore interfering with their plans, getting the council to agree to his reinforcement request. As soon as he mentioned reinforcements for his TIE interceptor program, it basically confirmed it was his fleet who attacked Bo and Din on Kalevala. I also love this peek behind the curtain of the Imperials, something which has been lacking all season up to this point. After the title sequence, we head to Navarro as Bo-Katan and her Mandalorian fleet arrive in orbit above the city, heading toward the Children of the Watch's camp. These scenes of the fleet arriving on the planet were super epic and really showed the might of Bo's forces so well. After landing and a little sizing up between the two groups, the armorer breaks the tension, welcoming the new Mandalorians. Greef meets up with Din to thank him with a bottle of Coruscant's finest and newly constructed IG-12 as a method of transportation for Grogu. The sequence with the Anzellan repeating "bad baby, no squeezy" at Grogu was hilarious, and seeing Grogu defy Din via the droid's yes and no voice box was great and super cute at the same time. I really like this new addition for Grogu since it not only allows him to go off on more adventures with Din, but also gives him more ways to communicate with the characters on screen. I love the scene of Din and Grogu in the market, with Grogu using his new IG suit to steal food and accidentally crush a Melurun fruit. It was honestly just nice to see Grogu get to do something at all in this episode. Later that evening, Bo addresses both tribes with her plans to retake Mandalore, explaining the dangers they may encounter and asking for volunteers from both sides. No one is quick to speak up, but eventually Din does, followed by Koska Reeves, Axe Woves, Paz Vizsla, the Armorer, and a few others from either side. Then we get another amazing sequence of the Mandalorian fleet leaving Navarro and coming out of hyperspace above Mandalore. This whole sequence made me feel like I was really watching an episode of the Clone Wars in the best way. After securing the drop zone and landing the ship, our group of Mandos were finally back on the planet together for the first time. As Bo exits the gauntlet, she can't help but smile, seeing the plans she once gave up on fall into place right in front of her eyes, and I was so happy for her. As they make their way across the terrain in search of the Great Forge, they come across a large craft carrying other Mandalorian survivors of the Purge. As the other Mandalorians make their approach, we find out that they're actually still loyal to Bo, pledging their allegiance to her service. The Mandalorian survivors discuss the events of the Great Purge with Bo and the others, explaining everything they went through during their refusal of surrender, but Bo stops them, admitting that she actually did surrender to the Empire. She explains that once their defeat was imminent, she met with Moff Gideon and the ISB to negotiate a ceasefire, ensuring all remaining Mandalorian lives and cities would be spared, citing it as her only option to save the Mandalorian people, though they were betrayed in the end, finally explaining how Moff Gideon got the Darksaber to begin with. My favorite line in this sequence from Bo is, "Mandalore has always been too powerful for an enemy to defeat. It is always our own division that destroys us." Later, after Bo's confession, Din approaches her explaining that he never knew the sacrifice she made for the Mandalorian people, but as Bo expresses her failings, Din disagrees, saying her song is not yet written and that he will serve her until it is done. He continues saying that he chooses to follow her because of her honor, loyalty, and character over anything else. And I believe his words were the only thing that kept Bo's fire from going out in this moment. From here, Bo discusses the updated plan with the armorer as she suggests taking the injured back to the fleet in the gauntlet, while Bo and the other Mandos stay to continue scouting out the forge. Conveniently, the Mandalorian survivors know where the Great Forge is located, offering to take Bo and her scouts there. As the two groups head off on their separate courses, a little animosity begins to build between Axe Woves and Paz Vizsla, resulting in a duel that neither group can interfere with. Grogu is actually the one to break them up, with Bo saying Din taught him well, but Din disagrees, implying that Grogu actually learned this from Bo. Din gives Grogu a nod of approval, and Grogu nods back, which was just super fucking cute. As the armor arrives back at the fleet, I couldn't help but wonder if she was trying to strand Bo, Din, and the others on Mandalore. I still don't fully trust her, but I guess we'll just have to wait for the finale to see what she does going forward. Our Mandalorians on the ground come across a nearby disturbance in the rocks in front of them, revealing a gigantic creature busting through the planet's surface, forcing the Mandos to abandon ship and retreat underground as the creature smashes the vessel. I initially thought this creature was the Mythosaur when it first appeared, but either way, Mando Season 3 really loves its giant monsters. As they travel through the caverns and underground passages, they finally make their way to what's left of the Great Forge, but are ambushed by Imperial armored commandos equipped with Beskar armor and jetpacks, causing a huge firefight. The Mandos are eventually able to force the Imperials to retreat, following them deeper into the caverns, slowly revealing what turns out to be an underground Imperial base, which I kinda had been expecting this whole time, but the way they revealed it caught me off guard. The design also reminded me a lot of the Imperial dig site on Zepho from Jedi Fallen Order in a really good way. Just as the Mandos realize what they've uncovered, the blast doors close, splitting them into two groups with Din on one side and Bo and Grogu on the other. As Din is overwhelmed and captured by the armored commandos, Moff Gideon finally makes an appearance, coming face to face with our heroes for the first time since Season 2, decked out in all-black Beskar armor and a horn-black helmet to match. His entrance was pretty intimidating, but the design kind of felt like a Mandalorian Darth Vader to me. Gideon informs everyone that he's created the next-gen Dark Trooper suit using Mandalorian Beskar, explaining his plan to take the best offerings of the cloners, the Jedi, and the Mandalorians to create an army that will bring order to the galaxy. This whole time I just found myself wondering why none of the Mandos had any bombs to try to blow their way through the blast door, or why Bo didn't try to cut through it with the Darksaber, or even why Grogu didn't use the Force to help Din at all. But plot, I guess. Moff Gideon then signals for his ships to attack the Mandalorian fleet and takes Din as a prisoner. Bo makes her presence known, telling Gideon she should have killed him when she had the chance, prompting him to demand she surrender the Darksaber. Of course, Bo declines, running to the door behind them to cut and escape through, while the other Mandos hold off the Imperial commandos. One by one, they're able to escape, with Paz choosing to stay behind to fight off the remaining commandos. Of course, I thought he was going to end up sacrificing himself, but he actually holds his own, taking out waves of commandos. Then, just when we think he's made it out okay, 3 Praetorian guards emerge and confront him. At this point, I knew it was over for Paz, and watching the Praetorian guards take him down was super brutal. This whole ending sequence was super dark, and the guards were honestly terrifying, but I loved every minute of it. And that's the end of the episode. So chapter 23 was actually really good. I really liked this episode, and I'm amazed at what they were able to accomplish, but on the other end, it also made the prior episodes seem a bit lackluster. The thing I've struggled with all season 3 is the lack of a clear narrative. I hate to echo what's already been said, but I feel like Din and Grogu reuniting in the Book of Boba Fett really messed up what Mando season 3 could have been. On a positive note, I've loved seeing Bo-Katan's growth and arc this season. One of my hopes for season 3 was that Bo would learn how to lead her people without the Darksaber, and I think that she's finally beginning to realize she can. I have no idea what to expect next week in the finale, and I'm a little nervous to see what they're able to pull off with just one episode left. If I have to make one prediction, I think we could actually get our first true Grand Admiral Thrawn reveal at the end. But what did you think of chapter 23, and what do you hope to see in the finale? Let me know in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter so we can chat more about it together. Please consider checking out all my Mandalorian videos at the link in the description and on the end screen of this video as well. I really appreciate all of your support so much. To keep up with all my Star Star Wars content, make sure to subscribe and consider following me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at ScottyHolidaySW for all my latest updates. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.